Arm Ukraine as you promised.
Arm Ukraine as you promised.
Arm Ukraine as you promised.
Fighter jets for Ukraine.
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 Air defense 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 for Ukraine.
Air defense.
Those are the weapons that the Ukrainian people need to defend themselves against the Russian terrorist regime. That is what has been provided by some countries who understand the threat of the terrorist Russian regime. Countries like Poland, countries like Portugal, countries like the United Kingdom, who understand that Russia cannot be trusted, who understand that Russia needs to be opposed, not just in Ukraine, but in every country that they have a sphere of influence. That is what we have to do, because that is exactly what they're doing to us. They are trying to oppose the West at every front. They are trying to subvert the West at every front. That is what the Russian terrorist regime does. And it's not doing so for lofty ideals and liberal views. They're doing so for simple power. They want to achieve that power for their elites. That is the only thing that matters. Coming back to Prigozhin once again, he admitted that this war was never waged to save anyone. This war was never waged to free the Russian population from the evil Ukrainians. No, this war was waged with one purpose only: to enrich the Russian elites. And they have tried their best to do so. Heroям slava! So my friends, we stand here today, as we stood here many other days, in front of this Russian embassy with a Russian flag over there, with a red stripe in the bottom. A whole sea of blood that they are creating right now. Not just in Ukraine, mind you, but the biggest one is in Ukraine. So many people have died for a war started by a warmonger, my friends. That is not a good way for us to move into the future. We want a future with nuclear demilitarization, not with nuclear saber rattling, as Russia has been doing ever since the beginning of this war. And in fact, even before this war began, Russia was also occasionally doing these thinly veiled nuclear threats to the rest of the world. Not long ago, the CEO of RT said that the Russians should nuke Siberia to show the full might and the full power of the Russian nuclear arsenal, and to scare the West into submission, to scare the Ukrainians into submission. Of course, the people who live in Siberia were not happy, and there was a big scandal because of this situation. They said, why should we get nuked, as these Muscovites live in their safe havens? There is a saying in Russia which goes like this: Moscow is not Russia. And it is true. I would even add to it, Moscow and St. Petersburg are not Russia. Those are the two cities to which all of the Russian money goes to. That is why those two cities are in fact not Russian cities, but European cities. The rest of Russia does not look like Europe. The rest of Russia looks like a third world country, my friends. And that is what we need to realize. Putin has not started this war to improve the quality of life of his people. He started this war to destroy the Ukrainian people and to enrich himself. Individuals with very, very fat pockets have a direct interest in attacking Ukraine and having Russia win this war. But we must know better than that. We must know that just like in World War II, to allow Hitler to take over Austria, to allow Hitler to start taking over Danzig, to allow Hitler to get cozy with the Soviet Union was a mistake. And in fact, Putin has claimed many times in the past that supposedly he's facing off against Nazis in this war. First point, Prigozhin said that they were fighting the Ukrainian military for years, and they still couldn't find these imaginary Nazis that the Russians were talking about for so long. Hey, Alexander, good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. This gentleman here is one of our big supporters. He came to our rallies very often, and he even came to Speaker's Corner with us to face off against the opposition. And opposition there was a lot, because many individuals are still very misguided. They still think that this war can be ended like that, just with Ukraine suing for peace. Because of course, when one side starts a war, what you really want to do is to ask the victim, to ask the people who are getting attacked to end the war. How would that ever end? If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine ends. But if Russia stops fighting, this war will finally end. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. This war would end, and it could have ended long ago. But the Russian terrorist regime does not want to keep its promises. Ukraine was the third biggest nuclear power in the world. He had the third biggest nuclear arsenal. And Ukraine gave it all up in exchange of nothing more but the peace agreement from Russia. And what did Russia give Ukraine in return? Ukraine claimed, or rather Russia in this case, claimed that Ukraine was going to join NATO and put nukes at their border. What sense would that make? Ukraine had nuclear weapons. Do you give up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world just so that you get other nukes in your lands? Is that the logic that we're believing in here? Ukraine was giving up its military, its conventional military too. A lot of their bombers, a lot of their tanks, a lot of their planes were being dismantled. What did Russia think of that? Did Russia perhaps think to thank Ukraine for demilitarizing? Or did Russia start making preparations to invade Ukraine and destroy the Ukrainian people when they had willingly weakened themselves in order to achieve world peace? And world peace, as a lofty ideal, it can sometimes be seen as impossible. And perhaps it is. But if we unite against terrorist regimes such as Russia, North Korea and Iran, we will be able to oppose these terrible precedents that these countries have. Russia is a terrorist state. Come back, don't run away. Hey! Hit and run.
It's a goodwill gesture.
It's a goodwill gesture. Look, it's a goodwill. Thank you. Hey, he said the joke. You know, very good one, my friend. Very good one. That's a goodwill gesture right there, as the Russians have said it. We've said this before in our rallies. But if you keep negotiating with psychopaths, if you give a psychopath half of what he wants, he's going to be unhappy. He's going to be wanting all of it. If you give him 1/4, he's going to be even more unhappy. He's going to be saying he's getting cheated. But if you give a psychopathic regime like Russia everything that they want, with no strings attached, they will take it and then they will demand the double. That is what happens with these regimes. Give them an inch and they will take a mile. This is always how it has been with Hitler, with Putin, with Stalin, with all of these psychopaths in charge of countries. That is why we cannot simply stand aside and forget who the leader of this powerful country or that powerful country is. Because one day we could become the victims of their psychopathic rules. Help Ukraine, protect peace.
Help Ukraine, protect peace.